Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. We have Danielle here. Danielle is the volunteer coordinator for Help One Child, and their mission is to strengthen foster, adoptive, and at-risk families by providing them access to education, community, and tangible resources. And that sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, and they do some amazing work. If you don't know, our church has partnered with Help One Child by hosting foster parent trainings and a few other events for foster dads. And so we've been working with this organization for, I was trying to remember the first event we did. I think it's about 2 years ago. And Danielle's been with us, helping us with some of the foster trainings. And did you help with the foster dad event too, Danielle? I don't remember.
Behind the scenes. I wasn't there in person. I'm not a foster dad, but I definitely
yeah.
behind the scenes.
Yes, good point. Very good. So Danielle, I just want to start off with letting you share how you're doing, how your family's doing, Help One Child staff through this whole crisis that we're going through.
Yeah, thank you. I think personally, the beginning was definitely a little more of a roller coaster than it is now. Things have kind of plateaued in my personal life. I decided to move the first week of COVID, and
wow.
That probably wasn't the most rational decision, but ultimately it is for the best, and we're settling in nicely, and it's been really nice. But moving on top of a pandemic has been an interesting challenge. And I think each one of the Help One Child staff members has had additional personal, not issues, but scenarios that have happened over the course of COVID, completely unrelated, that probably would have been a big event in itself without a pandemic. And so on top of that, it's been interesting to watch us all navigate and trying to support each other, but not in person. We're a very small staff, so in-person support is huge for our just for the six of us. So it's been interesting, but ultimately it's been good. God has been good through all of this.
Good. Glad to hear that. So specifically with the shelter in place, the COVID-19, how are you seeing that impacting foster, adoptive, at-risk kids and families that you're serving? What are you seeing?
Yeah. We're seeing a lot of crisis. A lot of families really had a hard time adapting to having their kids home. And I think that can be said for families across the board, but specifically for families who have kiddos with attachment disorders or are easily dysregulated with lack of structure or lack of routine. Taking their schooling or the day-to-day routine out of their life can cause some pretty horrific chaos. A lot of kids are regressing is the right word. A lot of kids are regressing and displaying some pretty big behaviors. And where Help One Child typically steps in is providing training for the families, providing support groups for the families and respite events. And those have had to be tailored to virtual support, and that can only go so far, especially when you're trying to attend a virtual support group and you still have screaming kids in the background. It's been a little difficult. We've seen families with some extremes be able to come over or overcome those extremes, which is nice. It's such an accomplishment to see. But we've also seen some families on the verge of putting their kids into a little more extreme care during this time. So, yeah, it's hard to have a blanket statement and say everybody is doing this, but it's, for the most part, it's not going too well for our families. We're doing what we can, and we're also trying to prepare for when we come out of a shelter in place, when families are more involved with the community and more CPS calls are going to be called, more families are going to be going into care. So how can we set safeguards up, or how can we beef up our system in anticipation for kind of a wave of kids as a result?
Yeah, that's one thing that's been sort of heartbreaking to hear and think about, the kids that are sort of just suffering right now and not being able to have anybody reach out to help them. Or yeah, that's hard to hear, and not really be able to help. And that's I think that's the biggest challenge for me in this whole crisis, is just there's a lot of ways we just can't help, and that's frustrating.
Yeah.
Sort of transitioning, when I first reached out to Danielle a couple weeks ago, in my mind, at least, Danielle, I was really just wanting to address COVID-19 and shelter in place. But then we've sort of had this whole idea of prejudice and racism, this, constant thread through our nation's history of this problem that we haven't really dealt with. And now it's really risen to the forefront. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit of, how does the work of Help One Child really address this? How does it help us as a community address this problem
Yeah.
that seems to be prevalent everywhere in our country?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as a staff, we really took a look at what our education structure looks like, what our resources look like, and how we can weave in a message of inclusivity or inclusiveness, and how we can promote just a community of safety for all involved, from the position that we already have from our current platform. We have a lot of transracial families that we serve, and we have a lot of transracial volunteers and churches that serve with us. So we want the best that we can to provide education, to provide awareness with the platform that we already have. So currently, during the last handful of weeks, for our virtual support groups, which are hosted on Sundays for foster and adoptive families, we've been addressing different areas of racial discrimination not amongst foster and adoptive families, but that have occurred to foster and adoptive families. Specific things that families with children of color tend to face, and how to address that with your children, and how to address it when you're confronted with those kind of questions or comments, or just lack of understanding, I guess. We also provide at-home family resource emails. So traditionally, or not traditionally, this all kind of happened during COVID. So none of it has been traditional, but we had started producing emails or sending out emails that had a list of resources for families to kind of access during a shelter in place, and then also a list of kids' activities that they can access that might be a little new and fresh. And this is a weekly email that was sent out every Friday. So we've started to incorporate more transracial adoption resources, more books on tapes that for the kids' activities that really address from a young age, it's okay to be your skin. It is okay to feel your feelings, to feel whatever that looks like for transracial families, but also how to address for the white kids, how to kind of lead them into this may not be something that you're experiencing, but your friend or your cousin or your brother or sister who is not the same skin tone as you are. Just resources that helps the parents and helps the kids kind of look at it from a different perspective that they may not have been able to look at it in the past.
Yeah, one of the things I've really appreciated about your organization is this isn't something you've just started addressing now. I mean, we've been partnering with you guys, hosting some trainings, and I know some of the trainings that we've had on our campus have even been addressing multiracial or transracial families, and that's yeah, I'm really excited, and we're glad to partner with you in doing that. So
yeah,
Danielle, could you speak a little bit to through these crises, both, you could choose either one or any of the crises that you want to speak to, but how people or churches, or even just the big picture of God, how churches have come through, or people have come through during this crisis in this season.
Absolutely. So I work directly with the churches in Santa Clara and San Mateo County. And at the beginning of the shelter in place, because we're a nonprofit, we anticipated a decrease in participation, in interest or funding, kind of anything along those lines. People are in a state of panic, trying to figure out their own lives, but we experienced the exact opposite. I was flooded with emails and phone calls from churches reaching out, trying to figure out how they can help, how they can make sure that Help One Child, they can make sure that the staff, the families being served are all settled and safe and okay. And it's just been nonstop, which is so encouraging. Personally, it's been hugely encouraging because I'm receiving the majority of those emails, but it's been amazing. We have been able to partner with churches that we haven't had contact with ever before, or even a handful of years. Churches looking to donate either funds or masks or any resources that they have access to, just trying to find where we can be supported, which is, it's amazing.
That is, I imagine that's super helpful as another nonprofit leader. I can imagine. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great to hear. What are some of the biggest challenges that you guys are facing? I mean, you mentioned some of the things that people are doing to help, but are there any other needs, or, if people want to get involved in helping, what are some ways that they can do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, our biggest need, or our biggest challenge, I guess, is not being able to see the families. We send volunteers, occasional volunteers, to go drop off groceries or educational supplies or toys to the families, but it's always a drop off on the porch, away from a distance, and families are really lacking that connection, and they're missing that that in-person connection, and we can't go into households anymore, and there's a lot of protocol that we've set up in place to keep our volunteers safe, to keep ourselves safe, and to keep our families safe, and it really starts to build up the isolation within the families when what they need the most is community and support around them. So we've been trying to be creative with how we do that, sending encouraging letters or emails to families, or offering some virtual support. But of course, that can only go so far. So that's a huge challenge that we're facing, but also just kind of trying to readjust our thought process about it, and rather than seeing it as a challenge, trying to look for ways to increase our support. It might not be the support that we used to do, but try to increase it a little more broadly. If anybody wants to get involved, or if they're looking for ways to serve, one of the programs that we run is Care Portal, and that is it's an online platform where social workers input the need of local foster and adoptive families, and the church receives that need and then sends the items out to that family, or goes and drops them off. They've launched a temporary disaster relief platform to help serve all of anybody impacted by COVID. And often those demographics are overlapping, the preventative demographic and the COVID at-risk demographic are sometimes one and the same, not always. So we now help with food insecurity, essential item insecurity, a little bit of housing insecurity, depending on kind of what that request is. And so if anybody is interested in kind of joining that team, that's definitely an easy on-ramp to do so. We also have our support groups, and we have monthly online trainings that we are trying to recruit virtual volunteers for, which is just one of the things that we're adjusting to, having virtual volunteers who kind of entertain the kids on Zoom while the parents are attending a meeting on Zoom. So it helps minimize the distractions for the parents. That would be awesome to have more volunteers be able to help with that. We would love to have one-on-one volunteers for each kid. And then of course, just prayer, just keep our families in your prayer, and help one child for sure.
Very good. Yeah, I was actually on your website, I think yesterday, and I was looking at the trainings because I need to do one coming up here. And I saw that you guys were hosting a virtual childcare, and I thought, how are they doing that? Like, if only Zoom could figure that piece out, I think they'd have a even bigger gold mine. But
yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, we'll put the information in the chat, and ways to get connected with Help One Child if you're looking to help. We'll connect you with that. So, well, Danielle, thanks for taking time, and man, thanks for just doing an incredible task that is just something that most of us probably haven't even thought about, and sharing with us how God and how the church is stepping up, and it's just so encouraging to hear. So we'll continue to pray for you during this season. So thanks for taking time to join us.
Yeah, thank you guys for your continued support.